Welcome to Turn Extension, a supplemental podcast for the Advanced Maneuvers YouTube channel.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Turn Extension. My name is Tony, or Polar Bear Cub on the forums.
Hey everybody, it's Kevin Dowdark on the forums.
Hey everybody, it's Devin, Cutthroat Cure on the forums.
Alright, so tonight, it is not our normal recording night. Normally we record on Fridays, but due to some scheduling issues, we are recording on Wednesday. And the fun thing about recording today is that the new CID just started, and it is Steamroller 2017.
Widget Armageddon!
Yes, the Widget Armageddon, where we see the uprising of people.
I believe actually the coined term is Widgetgate.
Yeah, Widgetgate, which I kind of want to see someone make like the ultimate widget where like it just expands, contracts, and like you can like fold it out to multiple things. That's what I'm hoping for.
I'm sure there's an engineer out there somewhere who could do it.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, Kevin has read through the Steamroller packet. I've kind of read through it. Devin has not read through it at all. So a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about, like this whole the Widgetgate, Devin actually doesn't know what we're talking about yet. Correct, Devin?
Correctamundo. Today was a busy day at work, and my wife is sick, and I am on baby duty. So if you hear any coos in the back, that's because I'm watching my son. But otherwise, it has prevented me from reading any of the new information about Steamroller 2017.
So, well, let's do a level set real quick. This is the CID for Steamroller 2017. Nothing being discussed is locked in stone. Like the whole thing, though I doubt it would happen, the whole thing could be completely trashed and started all over with something else. So this is just a CID. You know, material discussed within this podcast are subject to change.
Yep, yeah, that is a big thing. The stuff will change throughout the week. Probably by the time this podcast goes up, actually, we might see the second version of Steamroller coming out. It depends if they update on a Monday or if they're going to wait to update on a Wednesday. Also, hopefully by the time the next time we record, we will actually see the battle engines, I hope. I hope they'll be out by the next time we record, but it probably will be the time after.
Troll battle.
The only thing that I know the only thing that I know that is going to stay with this CID is the fact that we're getting a Steamroller 2017.
Yes, we do know that for a fact. So, I guess I'm trying to pull it up right now. So first thing, I guess let's just jump into the meat of this, which with the player responsibilities, which includes the measurement marker. So I guess the big thing is, I'll just read it, because that might be a little bit easier. So a measurement marker is a token, template, glass bead, or other item used by a player to mark the specific place on the board based on pre-measurement. For example, a player might use a glass bead to mark the charge range of an enemy warjack, or might place an empty model base to determine if a friendly model will fit into a specific space after charging an enemy. A player cannot have more than one measurement marker on the table at a time.
I forget, did it say proxy bases was a measurement marker?
It says, let's see, a token, temple, glass bead, or other item used by a player to mark a specific place. So by that, I think it might mean that the proxy base might be a measurement marker. Because you were placing it down and you were measuring, this is where my model is going to go to.
Well, the proxy base is actually it's a proxy. It's a marker of where something will go. It's not an actual measurement. Although I wouldn't put it past somebody to put a proxy base down to use it as a judgment of proximity 2-inch.
I know at least some models will place a proxy marker down and say, this is where my model is going to go. After all this stuff goes, I want this to be here because I know they're going to move there, and I want to make sure everything else moves around it. At that point, I would think that would be the exact same as a glass bead, which in my mind would mean, hey, that's a proxy. That is a measuring.
Yeah, so I think the dilemma that we run into with this, and when we talk about Widgetgate, this is kind of where some of the discussion that is going on is based around, and that is there is an aired appearance of PP is trying to remove a game state where when you look down at a table, you see 3 measuring sticks, 5 proxy markers, 2 Idaho widgets, and they're all kind of laid out, and basically your opponent has kind of laid out their battle plan before they've ever touched a model. I think that is what they're trying to prevent from happening. However, in the tried and true of PP, when something gets nerfed, it goes to the ground. It becomes a scenario where they've gone the route of only 1 marker. And why it becomes an issue is, as an example, I turn around and I put down, I have a jack that can assault 7 inches. I turn around and put down a 7-inch measuring stick, one of the little Muson Minis measuring sticks that they have out there. I put one of those 7-inch measuring sticks down in front of the jack to denote where the distance is. That's one measuring template. I put a proxy base down to denote this is where the jack is going. That is a second measuring marker if a proxy base is considered a measuring piece. I then turn around and put a flamer template out because in the assault, it's what is it, the Burning Truth or whatever, I put a flamer template out to measure how many models I can hit with that spray template. Even if the proxy base is not considered a measuring marker, the second that 7-inch assault widget is out and the flamer template is out at the same time on the table, I have created an illegal game state by this rule.
Yep. So, and that's where we're at. So, Devin, what are your thoughts on this? This is the first time you're hearing it.
My thoughts are, so I'm going to kick myself for saying this, and I know that Solus is going to absolutely have a field day with this, but I disagree with this decision on PP's part, mainly because of the fact that you look at a game like Guild Ball, who uses a lot of precision markers in order to make sure that models are put into the proper place, goals are, set up. And I've seen Solus himself, when he plays, put down like 4 or 5, measurement markers to make sure he's doing something. And then, of course, when it's his turn, when he does activate all his stuff, he's able to do it quite well. Everything's very precise. We know where he's going. There's not a lot of confusion. My question to this is, why does Privateer Press think that limiting the amount of widgets while also keeping in pre-measurement is somehow going to make the game more competitive and or cleaner and all around a better game design?
So I guess my initial thoughts of that is that if you put out multiple models, I think the difference is in Guild Ball, you only have 5 models total per team?
6, I think. Okay,
so you have 6 models. In Warmachine, you have a lot more. So if I'm putting out all these proxy bases, unless the proxy bases are numbered or they're denoted saying, hey, this is my Ironclad proxy base, if you're putting out these proxy bases and then you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and you start moving the models, I've been in games where I can't keep up, where I'm like, okay, I don't understand what's this proxy base and what's this one, and everything just kind of went into place, and I'm not sure what exactly happened all of a sudden, because they're moving these proxy bases up, and sometimes people will be very clear with that. People say, okay, I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden things move together. And I get uncomfortable with that because it moves too fast. There's too much going on, and if you weren't an honest player, it'd be easier, I feel, to confuse your opponent.
See, my question to that is then, why is there so much confusion about whether or not the proxy base is considered a measurement marker? Because to me, with the wording as it was read, makes me feel like they are directly looking at, your widgets, they're looking at your measuring devices, they're looking at all of those, and I feel like that's the direction as it was read to me.
I think it's definitely a situation where if they're going to go down this route, they're really going to need to label out, like, these things are considered, like, we all know what the measurement tools are out there. There's the, the Idaho shape widgets, or whatever terminology they want to use for that. There's the, pro measurement gauges and stuff like that. So there's terminology that we can use to clarify what is considered a measurement tool and what is just considered a marker.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem, and to address kind of your concern over you get confused about what's happening. One of the detractors to this ruling is, if I were to sit down, and as a prime example, the video we just posted up this week where I was playing Krios, I had actually sat down with Steve and we had like mapped out where models were going to charge with like 6 proxy bases. Like, this model is going to go here, this model is going to go here, this one's going to run behind, this one's going to run behind. And we basically mapped out an entire movement of a unit before we touched any model. And then I looked at Steve and I was like, are you okay with this? Yes. Okay, I'm okay with this. Okay, now we're both going to step through the motions because we both have consented. We know what's going on. And we everything was hashed out and everybody agreed on it before a model was touched. That's precision gameplay at its peak. Like, nothing has been moved, no game state has been changed, and both players agree on an outcome before anything actually happens. And I can't do that under this rule.
I think that makes sense until you get short on the clock. And once you get short on the clock, people are not going to measure everything out. Are you okay with this? And move their models. They're going to measure everything out and then move their models right away. And yes, I guess at that point there could be less models at the time, but I just think that overall that I think this is trying to detract from that late game state. It doesn't matter so much in the early game state. It's all about the late game, I think, with what this rule plays with.
So
let me ask a hypothetical question, just because I'm curious about this. So by this rule, if I was to have down, let's say I have one of the, let's say I have a movement stick down. I'm moving 6 inches. I'm just walking. I set my movement stick down to 6 inches. I put the proxy base at the end of the 6 inches, okay?
Okay.
I have now made an illegal move.
Assuming proxy bases are considered a measurement to a widget or token, yes.
Correct. So then how do they expect you to do the precision? So it's like, either this rule says you can't use proxies because of the fact that there's physically no way that you can be precise when using a movement stick to set it down to move something. And then if it's not, so let's say that proxy bases are not being considered a measurement device, then your entire discussion, Tony, is considered invalid because they can put down as many proxy bases as they want.
So I think you're nitpicking too much, saying as soon as I put the widget down, as soon as I put the proxy base down, I'm illegal. I think the intent is you put the widget down, then you put the proxy base down, and then you pick the widget up immediately. That's not, I think that's the intent. I feel like the path you're going down is nitpicking too much.
And so it becomes a situation of, so a prime example, a Scorn player puts down Mullet Karn. They put down a measurement tool to measure how far Mullet Karn moves or charges, puts down the proxy base where Mullet Karn lands, turns around, rolls dice, kills a model, triggers a sidestep. Now, per this ruling, the player needs to clean up his measurement gauge and the proxy token before he can put down the sidestep gauge to get a precision sidestep, and the proxy token where that sidestep's going to go to do that attack, to pick those tools up, to turn around and put another sidestep gauge down and his proxy base to get a precision movement. So it becomes a situation of, if your argument is they're trying to clean up time, they're going to add time, not clean up time.
So again, but in your example, you're using that proxy base because you can't physically get Mullet Karn in there, correct?
No, you're using the proxy base because you don't want to change game state before you've gone through the actions. There's been many times where
for precision.
With many times where Steve has had Mullet Karn go on a rampage, and Mullet Karn does not move until the end, and he's done.
Okay.
And then the model moves.
And see, I think this is where the word needs to be cleared up, because I think when I read this, I feel the intent is to make it so there's not 50 proxy bases out there, and then moving are your models. I think the intent is supposed to be you do the actions with your one model, you measure out what you want to see, and then you activate that one model. Or if you put that one model out there, then all of a sudden you're not putting out multiple widgets on like, hey, this model can move here, then to here, then to here, and going back and forth. I think that's what the intent is. I don't feel it's worded correctly, but I think what you guys are arguing is kind of the extreme. That's something that I think this rule is kind of supposed to allow the two interactions you guys are saying as being okay, but hey, I'm going to do all this stuff with my whole army and then move my stuff afterwards, or I'm going to put all my stuff out here, leave 50 widgets out there with these proxy bases, and then move things afterwards.
I think another big consideration is the fact, especially when it comes to the wording, is they need to solidify if, say, I have a model and, let's say I have an old Mulg that doesn't allow a model to be base with his front arc, and I put down a proxy base signify that this is Mulg. Is that counting towards my measurement tools? Am I allowed to place another proxy base in order to move that if I don't have the actual movement? You see, there's like a lot of different clarifying features that, and then we run into a very large issue that GW has, where is it as the rule is read, or is it as the rule is intended? Because
you picked right out of my mind, because that's basically when you're talking about, we're bringing up arguments of extreme have to be brought up in a system that has rules as written, not rules as intended. Because if it's rules as written, which Warmachine and Hordes across the board has been touted as a rules as written system, you're going to take it to that extreme every time. You're going to have somebody who turns around and goes, Judge, my opponent just put down a measuring stick and a proxy token. Please DQ them. They've created an illegal game state.
Correct.
You're going to have somebody in the community that does that.
And I get that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the CID is we can see the wording and it can get corrected beforehand.
Absolutely.
Because also the nice thing is you can see the developer notes where you can see, hey, this is what our intention is. I don't think they put it out for this yet, but they will explain what their intention is for each of these things, and then it helps the community to say, okay, this is how it should be worded, or this is how we see it being worded, so we don't have these situations. That's what I'm saying. I'm looking at for what I think the intent is. Is it written correctly? I don't think it is, but my vision, what I think the intent is what I was explaining, and I think now it's just it's either privateer press is either going to nix it, which they very well could. Like just reminding all of our listeners, we are only a few hours after this has been posted, and none of us have been on the CID forums to read what has been said. But they can either nix this completely, or they can change the wording to clarify what we're talking about.
And I mean that's the whole point of the CID. So one of the things that the community, and I honestly feel like the community is still, at the most part, still trying to understand how to approach the CID. A lot of people obviously read the whole token situation. It was like, oh my God, the world is coming to an end, and they need to realize this is the whole point of the CID. Like, this is literally why the CID is occurring. That way we do catch this stuff, and you're not getting a final product that says only one token.
Right. And
Go ahead, Tony.
No, I was saying, and it's nice because they can test these new things out and see what the community feels. And then if the community is very, very much so against this, I feel Privateer Press will most likely pull this back off. But it kind of gives them a playground to just test new stuff out. Hey, this is what we're thinking for the next year of competitive play. Does the community like this? No? Okay, let's scrap it. And it really does, it feels more as an open dialogue is what the community, I feel, has been wanting.
So to completely push to move past the widget thing when you guys get a second, just because I don't want to get directed on just one topic or one aspect of this CID. But since I haven't read the packet, what other changes, once we finish our statements on the widgets, what other aspects to the CID were discussed?
Oh, there's a couple of objectives. They released new scenarios. I mean, there's a lot of things. I think in closing on the widget thing, I legitimately hope they don't remove the rule. What I would like to see is something along the lines of when you start a unit or a model's activation, you can put as many damn proxy token widgets, measuring gauge, flamer template. I don't care. Like, put as many things as you want down to get consent from your opponent and pre-measure that activation and make sure that you have precision play on that activation. And once that activation's done, clean up all your shit, put the model back where it belongs, and then go to your next activation. And again, in that activation, go through your widgets, your tokens, your whatever you need to. That way, you're still allowing for full precision, but it's only in an activation. It steps away from the world where it's like at the beginning of the turn, your opponent turns around and goes, okay, I'm going to take a measure widget. What's your threat range? All right, I'm going to use some dice or some glass beads, and I'm going to measure out the arc of your threat range, and then I'm going to put these tokens down and this widget down, and basically spends the first 10 minutes of their game mapping, or well, that would probably be bad on them. The first 2 to 3 minutes of their turn mapping everything out with proxy tokens and widgets. And then getting into that realm where you said it was easily confusing of, okay, I'm activating this and this, and you're like, okay, cool, but I forgot what this token was. I forgot what this token was. Whereas if it's in an activation, you're like, I understand what this token is because we're dealing with it right now.
All right. Let's move on to the next part.
I love the new objectives. Legitimately love the new objectives. So the objectives, one of the big things that was a changeover is the objectives now have a kind of tactician-esque rule to them, which is objective models no longer block line of sight and no longer prevent charging. So a friendly model can charge through your objective. So a scenario like I've put my jack behind, I don't know how many times I've seen this or done this, is I've put my jack behind the objective, and then you get in a way where the objective now prevents me from charging your model, so I have to destroy my objective in order to charge your model. Now I can just charge through my objective and beat the crap out of your model.
That's actually pretty awesome. That's nice. That's actually really cool.
One of the things that they did to the objectives that I wasn't too terribly thrilled at, but I see where they're going with it, is they've removed the dual effect of objectives. So in scenarios where it's like, I think it was Arcane Effigy, you got a spell benefit, and then if you hit it, you get they had the Nimbus ability, so you take electrical damage. So it had two effects to the objective, along with the standard rules of immobile, friendly model, and all that stuff. Now it's trimmed down to a single rule, and most of the rules are very light benefit in a way. So one of the bigger ones that I noticed was Bunker, everybody's favorite. One less dice, and you get is gone. I think Bunker now is any model that's within range. You target with a range attack, you reduce the range by -2.
No, Bunker is Bunker has enemy models. Yep, no, you're right. Yep. Enemy range attacks targeting this model or a friendly model base to base, and this model suffer -2 range.
Yeah, so not something that causes you to gain a huge defensive bonus, or there's no cloud effect to objectives anymore. I don't think the give your weapon magic ability exists anymore.
It does.
So, it does? Which one is it?
So that one is Armory, can give you magical for 1 round, or it can do fuel catch to give you its continuous fire.
Continuous fire.
Yep. But not crit continuous fire, just normal continuous fire.
Correct. But none of them provide in any sort of caster survivability to them.
Yeah, it doesn't look like any of them do at this point.
Because like the -2 range is like, okay, cool, I'm -2 range. It means I need to scoot a little closer. So what? I can still kill your caster.
Right.
So they've definitely made it where the objectives, I think what they've done is they've kind of gone with all of the objectives provide something, but none of it's really amazing. So it's more of an afterthought or a supplement than I'm always going to take Bunker because I want to deny a shooting army the ability to gain that control point.
Devin, what are your thoughts?
I think it's definitely an interesting thought. I'd be curious to see how it plays out. So I'm excited to read like some of the result notes as people test this out. I do know that me and my gaming group here tested out Steamroller 15 and 16. So that was definitely interesting. I think my biggest concern about the objectives is the fact of them becoming basically, where it becomes a manner of what's their use, Like you're giving these abilities, I get it, but if the abilities barely add anything, then why not just make them some sort of like quasi-flag, because we have flags. The flags don't have abilities. We use them quite, efficiently. Why, does it come to the point of, are we giving objectives rules just because, or because we actually feel that it's going to add a tactical advantage?
I think that all the objectives provide you some sort of tactical advantage. It's just not to an extreme where one objective benefits all the others, like bunker or the fuel cache for the smoke clouds or anything like. In 2016 there were some clear cuts. I don't know what objective to take. I guess I'll take bunker. I don't know what objective to take. I'll take effigy.
Yeah, I think even in 2015, Arcane Wonder had the ability where I think it was either upkeep or normal spells cost one less focus.
Yeah.
That was extremely powerful. Now there's not that one where it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to go to for everything. It's just like, here's a more balanced of these are the things that I'm interested in.
What the era fuel cache where, I can charge without spending focus? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is by providing objectives that have, I don't want to call them minuscule benefits, but not extreme benefits, then there's less concern of army testing that needs to be done, because I have to imagine on some of those scenarios, like the free charges, that's a pretty big benefit. That could sway one army's ability to function on the table more than another army's.
That's true, yeah.
And there's kind of some play testing involved in, whereas if it's something as simple as this objective causes you to shoot 1-2 less inches, that's not something that necessarily will make a huge sway. Now, I say that, and the Retribution and Signar players are like, fuck you, I'm losing 2 inches. But it's one of those situations where it's not a make or break or super abusable ability. So I legitimately enjoy these new objectives. They'll give you a slight benefit to your army, but in the end, it's not going to be a make or break for anybody, both receiving the benefit, or being on the receiving end of the benefit or receiving the benefit.
Now, did I hear correctly when we were starting with our intro that somebody said there's set turns?
Yes.
There is. Yes, there is now 7 rounds. Period.
Yes.
End of story. No, they have heard the pre-CID concerns. I'm going to call them concerns, even though they were pretty much ranting and ravings on the internet.
Hey man, the internet doesn't rant and rave.
I like to think that we helped with that. I like to think that our cast helped with that. And I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back, because that was definitely one of our suggestions, was just do a set number of turns.
Yeah, you give that pat on your back if it helps you go to sleep at night. I am almost certain PP already had it in plans. It was a situation. I legitimately think, and we addressed this kind of when we were talking to Leclerc. It was a scenario of they're going to put out 2 options. Do you do random or do you do set? And then they probably already had determined what the path they were going down.
I think initially they were really excited about the idea, and then when there's so much backlash, I think that's, it could have been something from, I think it's just the community in general is what stopped, would turn their thought around. Overall, I'm excited with it. The interesting thing is, though, Devin, is that so you can still score a quote-unquote unlimited amount of control points, but if your opponent ever gets 6 more control points than you have, then the game ends.
Yeah, so scenario wins now are 6 higher than your opponent, not 5.
Which I like. I think that has some tactical. I think it brings a new thing to play, because now I'm a little bit more open to potentially giving my opponent 2 control points for keeping me in the kill box if I know I can still keep scoring in some other form to keep myself still in the game.
I don't like it.
Why?
So here's my concern with it. The ability to score points has been increased. Like, it's relatively safe. You could get 2 points in most of the scenarios that come in the 2017 packet per turn with relative ease.
Okay.
Not necessarily, if your opponent's actually paying attention, we're 2 points. You could go up to 3 or 4. If your opponent's not paying attention, or if your opponent's just steamrolling the crap out of you, you may not get 1. The problem I have with it is that I don't want to say that scenario is dead, but my gut, untested, pure gut opinion is that scenario is merely going to be a side game to lull your opponent into an assassination. Like, you're going to have a lot more games that end on assassination more than they ever end on scenario.
I mean,
a lot.
I feel like that was a thing, though. At least when SR first started, is that you would end a lot of the time on assassination. It's a viable option. I love it because I love assassinating. That's, for me, that my playstyle is I love to assassinate people. It's great.
I think my biggest concern comes to the fact of, and it's going to be funny, so here's where the TO in me comes out. I think that the biggest issue I see from this new ruling is the fact that in 90% of scenarios when you have a tie, the tiebreaker is going to usually comes down to control points. So if they don't change that to where it goes number of wins, then control points, you then create a situation where, you could have 2 players basically farming control points, moving around, doing this, farming control points, and then finishing. And then physically, if there is any sort of tie, you've basically locked in the fact that you're going to win just because you kind of cheated the system. And that, to me, feels a little bit slighted and dirty, especially if they don't change that ruling where control points is the tiebreaker, then kill points.
So control points is still the second tiebreaker.
Yep.
So first tiebreaker is Warcaster/Warlocks remaining. Second is control points. Third is army points destroyed. And fourth is scenario presence.
Yeah, so right there, you're going to have that you're going to have that issue where if you could technically get unlimited and, you can't be 6 points, you just basically toe that line back and forth because people already farm kill points. Let's be honest. But you could always kind of say, all right, that's one thing, but if somebody's if you're not farming control points, not control points but kill points, and somebody plays the actual scenario, then they're going to be higher up in the rankings. Now you've got the situation where now you can have your cake and eat it too, because you can farm kill points and control points at the same time and just boost your ranking.
And have all the fun.
I almost wonder what happens in a scenario where, you go in, you score 3 control points. Now your opponent cannot win on scenario until they get to 9. If they can only acquire, or, if you play the game enough that they can only acquire, 2 control points a turn, then theoretically they can't do anything to potentially even win until the 6th round or 6th turn, because the first turn's running, and then you're going to need 5 turns to get to a point of being 6 or higher. So it's almost like as soon as you get to 3, you take scenario off the table, and then you're just going to have to play cagey until they offer you an assassination. It feels like the game is going to go into the place of, here's my assassination list, and for my pairing, here's my other assassination list.
I think it'll be interesting to see after the first week of results come out, to see what actually happens, if your fear is justified.
So one of the other things that will be interesting for the TOs is that they've now released 3 standard, we'll use templates for deploying terrain. I'm sorry, TOs.
I didn't catch that. What?
So there's 3 types of scenario. There's 3 types of ways of deploying terrain. It's cluster, scatter, and quadrant. Cluster you take a piece of terrain and you put it somewhere where the terrain piece is touching the center point of the board. Now this could be the far left-hand side of said terrain piece, but that piece is touching the center of the board. And then you put your second piece down within 6 inches of the first piece. And then you put a third piece down within 6 inches of the first piece and the second piece. And you do this again, I think, 2 more times or 3 more times. So when you're done, in the center of the board, there's like 5 pieces of terrain somewhere near that center point. And then you go through and you can put other, because it says 6 to 8 pieces, then you're going to go through and put anywhere from 1 to 3 of those pieces, outside that area, but still within, I believe it's 8 inches of, or not within 8 inches of the center pieces. And you can't have anything within 6 inches of a table edge. So in a world where people have been throwing up their arms going, we want more terrain in the center, we don't want this terrain pushed off to the side, cluster deployment is going to be your favorite version of deployment.
I like that in the fact that now it's more standardized. I think this is something that had to happen with the game. You have to start standardizing how terrain goes out, because if you go to one store, now the counter argument is going to be, man, that's a lot of terrain that TO has to provide now. At least when I was PGing at one of the stores I like to go to, there's not a lot of terrain at all.
So let me describe to you how scatter terrain works. Scatter terrain, you put a piece in the center, you then scatter using the scatter templates to your terrain pieces from those center pieces. And then you kind of scatter things out from the next piece that you do and the next piece and the next piece. Or quadrant, you take the table, you cut it in fourths, you put something, a piece of terrain in each of the quadrants and the center point of those quadrants, and then you kind of sprinkle some other pieces around. My concern for the TOs isn't necessarily, I think this will be beneficial for the game of getting more pieces into the terrain. It's almost basically forcing players, look, we tried to be nice and tell you just put more things in the terrain. We tried to tell you not to be within 6 inches. You're still throwing everything on the outside. So now we're basically forcing your hand. Here's the deployment measures. The problem is that you're going to have this TO who's like, I've got to do scatter terrain for 8 tables. That's going to take me like 20 minutes to set up all my tables.
Yeah, but it takes like 20 minutes to set up your tables normally, I feel. I don't know. It might be me. I might have been really slow, because I one of the things I hate more than anything else, and this is honestly my feeling of it, is I hate setting up tables, because I hate trying to figure out where to put things. This, for me at least, it's like, okay, cool. I know exactly, hey, I'm going to do everything cluster, or hey, I'm going to do everything scatter. Just roll through, put it all down, because now at least it's right there. I know if people complain, it's like, well, it's in the packet. I hated setting up tables.
It provides you guidance. And I mean, for people like Fort, when Fort runs terrain, he was already basically doing this. Like, Fort will give you a table that's got so much terrain in the center, and it makes sense, and there's diversity in the terrain. Like, he really goes out of the long way to set up really dynamic and tactically, complex tables. I have, however, also traveled to tournaments where I have literally seen my TO at that tournament grab some random pieces of terrain, not even caring what type of terrain it was, and just literally shoving it on the board and walking away. Like, they spend more time setting up the scenario than they did the terrain. So, it's a situation where I worry that the TOs are going to struggle trying to get all these tables set up every single round with these very specific ways of doing it.
So, not to rush everything, but I do want us to wrap up here pretty soon. I know there's still a lot more to talk about, and I feel like our next couple of casts, we will probably be talking about this. At some point, we'll actually hopefully be able to get Will Pagani on to help us out with these conversations as well. But that being said, what else do we want to move on to for this CID?
I think we'll kind of skip the concept of going over the scenarios, because I think the scenarios are probably going to be the most dynamic changed. Basically, from a standpoint of scenarios, there's going to be a lot of scenarios where they have anywhere from 4 to 5 scoring elements on a table at any given time. One of the other things I think we would be remiss not to address is how scoring works. So, as was talked in the prior cast, Jacks can only score in round zones, and Warriors can only score in
rectangle zones,
and then Warcasters can score anywhere. So it becomes a situation where your Warcaster becomes a very, important piece, not only because of the army, but also because he is the one model on the table who can score anywhere. Like, there's no difference. But because it's warrior based, it gets into a situation. I saw something on a Manoth forum and actually or the Manoth Facebook group, and actually kind of got me curious. Is that Manoth has a theme force where it's obviously designed to be really jack heavy, and there's a lot of people who were talking about is like, well, do theme forces run into an issue because my theme force basically I've designed a theme force that allows me to bring 6 jacks, and it's awesome, and I can fuel them, but then I get stuck with a rectangular scenario and I can't score. And then we get into the scenario where I was talking about 3 points, and then that 3-point scenario of I need to get +6 becomes even harder. So it's like, I got to build a list that needs infantry, but I have a theme force that can't, or doesn't do it well, I should say. So I don't know. It'll definitely be an interesting scenario. I think scoring might be a gotcha that people need to get adjusted to, because I could easily see somebody playing a game, putting a jack in a square zone, and at the end of the turn going, oh, I claim 1, and your opponent going, nope, no you don't.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that is definitely going to happen. Devin? Devin might be dead.
Yeah, I can definitely see where Kevin's coming in that. For when it comes to an earlier statement of where we were talking about the terrain, I definitely feel like dynamic terrain, that this could either be a really good change or it could be a very shitty change, because, are they telling you exactly what types of terrain to put down, or do they have a rule that says it has to be this diverse? Like, you have to consider this and that.
No, they didn't necessarily say, like, for scattered you must have 2 forests and you must have. They didn't go to that extreme. The only thing that they have in there from like a criteria or requirement standpoint of terrain is the old ones where it's like unrestricted can be within 2 of each other, restricted can't be within 5. Same thing as we had in Steamroller 2016. The only other thing that I saw was that there was actually a call out for every table should have 2 line-of-sight blocking terrains on it. Well, and it basically was like force, obstruction, and there's a third one, I forget what it was. But it basically called out, like, it was almost like PP was saying, look, we designed these steamrollers to have things that need to be in the center that block line of sight, so it's not a gun fest.
Which is good, because that was a fear that a lot of people had for a while. Even playing in Snare, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, we play Snare, but every terrain was pushed to the side. Not the case anymore. So it's really allowing those non-gun armies, like I think that was a big issue with Crix for a long time. Well, now I feel like with this rollout, it makes it at least a little bit easier. Hopefully it does. I mean, we'll see within the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
All right. Are we good?
Yeah, I think we can maybe touch on some of the scenarios next week when we've got a revision come in, because I think some of the scenarios are pretty interesting. Like, I am excited for 2017. I think it brings scenario play. There's plenty of options for scoring points. I think that there's no one favored play style over the other. I'm not too terribly thrilled about my gut feeling that assassination is going to be the majority outcome of most games.
Now 2 things. First thing, I like that that this is gonna be an evolving conversation over the next few casts as we see where the CID goes concerning Steamroller 2017. My second thing is, wasn't there a shout out you wanted to throw out, Kevin, before we close?
Oh, yeah. David Canty, where the hell are you, dude? You used to, like, regularly give us little, funny little things that would, like, I'd chime into the Facebook group and be entertained by being able to, read little memes that would post, or, little comments in the YouTube, and the dude goes dark. Haven't heard from him since. So, like, where are you, dude? Shout out time.
All right, guys. So with that being said, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of Turn Extension.
Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.